What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special guest. Today we have my father, Poppy. We got a lot of requests for him to finally show up on a video and do one. So today we're going to be doing venison corned beef today with St. Patrick's Day right around the corner. Today we are going to be showing you guys how we do the pickling, the spices to get everything ready for the corned beef, and then we'll be letting it cure. And then in a week we will come back and we will do our cooking segment with the corned beef. So today, we will be showing you corned beef and how we do the pickling here at the Funny Farm.
Good morning, everybody. Here I am. I'm going to show you how to make some corned beef. First of all, what we're going to start with is with the salt. You have to use a good pickling salt or a good kosher salt. Do not use table salt, which is going to be too salty, and it has additives in it. You don't want any kind of additive inside. You just want a good pickling salt. I use basically 1 cup of salt to about 4 cups of water. The only reason I'm doing this right now is I'm just warming it to dissolve the salt. I don't want it too hot, because this is going to go into the brine. I will add some sugar to it. Now, sugar has no importance into this recipe except for it tenderizes the meat a little bit and it gives you just a little bit of flavor. I don't use a lot, maybe about a tablespoon.
Is that regular sugar or dark brown sugar?
This is dark brown sugar. You could use white sugar, but the dark brown has a bit of molasses in it, which also adds to the flavor. So just a little bit into the water. Like I said, about a tablespoon. I don't use any more than that. And then you just stir it to dissolve. Like I said, I did this in lukewarm water, 4 cups, just to get it dissolved. You keep stirring it until it totally dissolves. I will add more spices to it as we go along. All right, I have my 1 gallon of salted water. That is cold. You don't want anything warm. A note here, when you use water, make sure you use good well water or you use bottled water. Do not use city water. It has chlorine in it. Chlorine will give it an off taste. A lot of people say it doesn't make a difference. Well, it does make a difference to me. So I'm making this so it's going to be the way I say it.
You tell him, Dad.
Yes. All right, now we're going to add some spices. So this is nice and cold. We have a gallon here. It should taste salty, but not like the Dead Sea. All right, the only reason I'm saying that is because we are using smaller cuts of meat. This is venison, has no real fat in it. So all this is just basically going to cure nice in a salt. Otherwise, it's too salty and people are just going to poo-poo it. And that's not a good thing. Always have a towel next to you and have clean hands. Most important, everything should be clean. Now this is curing salt number 1. In the old days, people didn't have curing salt. What they had was celery seeds, celery. They had other seasonings that contain nitrite in it. Nitrite is what preserves the meat and prevents basically spoilage. I didn't notice myself, but they used a lot of celery seed in their seasoning. It wasn't for flavor, it was for the nitrite that they needed to preserve the meat. This is pink because you do not want to mix this with your regular salt. This is, if you have too much of it, or if you ingest it too much, it could be toxic. All this gives me is the color of the meat when you're cooking it. I'm basically, to a gallon, I'm going to use maybe 1/3 or 1/2 teaspoon. That's all you need for the curing salt. You have enough regular pickling salt in here to keep the meat from spoiling. So all I do is just put a half a teaspoon in there, stir it up. It's only there to make sure that the meat is nice and red when you're smoking it or cooking it down or braising it. The other step I like to use is I like to use basically a whole head per gallon of garlic. Now if Damien had a little sharper knife, it would be easier for me, but you can take some of the paper off that comes off loosely. I don't. I just throw the whole damn thing in here. Break off some of the cloves. Get rid of the paper. This isn't bad. Just leave it all in. And we get rid of all of this because we don't need it anymore. Everything else comes in these little containers. Now for the spices, this is the basic pickling spice. I like to use, for a gallon of water, is about a tablespoon of coriander, a tablespoon of mustard seed, which should have been open and prepared for me, but we're dealing with Damien, so.
Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome. Nothing like being prepared. Oh, that's out of the way. A tablespoon of mustard seed. You can use white or brown, it don't matter. I like to use a good tablespoon of red pepper flake, bay leaf. Bay leaf, believe it or not, gives you, oh, here we go again.
I was waiting for that. I knew that one wasn't opened either. I just bought it.
This is why when you're in my kitchen, everything is all set and prepared.
Next video will be at your house.
Yes, it will be. Bay leaf again is a strong flavor. It gives it that umami that you use in soups and stews. I just crush it up a little bit to get those flavors going. Some people like to put cinnamon stick in there. I basically don't use it, but in a spice mix blend that you get from a store that comes in a container like this, basically they have a cinnamon stick or cinnamon, ground cinnamon in it. I throw that in there.
Do you need that plop sound when it goes in?
No, no plopping.
Okay.
A couple of whole spice berries, a handful, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, all this is to your flavor, to your adjustment. You're gonna have to make this a couple of times, write it down for yourself so you can distinguish the flavors you like.
What happened to that bottle?
Oh, this is whole pepper. I like to put basically a handful like this. I don't even go by tablespoon. Black peppers are good for you. It has good flavor. All right. Some people like this, which is, again, clove. This is very strong. 3 or 4, that's all I would use. Some people even add star anise to it, but I don't like it. Ground ginger, I don't use. Ground cardamom, you can use, but I don't use it in my recipe. But what I do use is allspice. I use a couple of allspice berries also. 5, 6, 7, 8. All depends on what your preference and your taste is. Basically, just put a good mix to it. Stir it up. And just start putting your meat in here and making sure it's covered.
All right, everyone, what we have here next is the venison meat. I just weighed it out. It's roughly 7 pounds. There's several pieces in there. There's 4 or 5 pieces, and that is what I call the London broil cut of the venison. It's off the hind quarter. You get one big piece, you get a small piece, you guys get that football roast in there, and then you get that little pink fillet that's in the hind quarter. So these are the smaller and larger London broil cuts off the hind quarter of the deer.
All right, so I'm just basically checking to make sure there isn't a whole bunch of silver skin or fat. There is really not much fat in these things, but you try to get as much of the silver skin off because that's going to be a lot easier to digest and cut later. Most important is that the meat is totally covered and everything stays cold. You want to at least keep this at 38, 40 degrees, and you don't want to go any higher because that's when spoilage and everything else likes to come in.
So keeping this in the refrigerator covered. And how long are we keeping this in the refrigerator for?
4 or 5 days. You can go in every other day just to stir it up and get things moving around, because as the meat lays on top of each other, it basically prevents good penetration. So I like to just go in there once a day, just move it around. Make sure nothing settles at the bottom. I've read in some books that you can keep this actually on the counter, excuse me, if you have a good amount of salt on there. And they don't use the #1 curing salt, again, which that prevents the meat from turning gray. But you have to understand, if you keep this on the counter, you don't go 7 days, 4 or 5 days the most. But every day what you have to do is put your finger in there, stir it, and see what the water feels like. If you pull your finger out and it wraps around your finger and it looks stringy, they basically call it a rope or whatever. That's a sign that this brine has gone south. In other words, take it out, take the meat out, dump the brine out, wash the meat again in cold water, and start your brine over again. But continue it if it was gone bad in, let's say, 3 days. Wash, clean everything, put a new brine in there, and then continue for another 2-3 days. But you have to check to make sure that you don't have that ropey condition where it basically slimes up on the surface. You'll see it. It forms a skin. You put your finger in and it likes to attach. It's like a booger. It just hangs off your finger. You don't want that.
Don't want a booger in your meat.
No, you don't. You just get rid of it, wash it, put a new brine in, and then continue with your days in the fridge. But normally for 7 days, this is good. When we had the deli, Nikki and myself, I used to make the brines, and we used to do the briskets. We used to do 5, 6, 7 briskets at a time, and I'm talking 18 pounders. And we used to keep it in there for 7, 14, 21 days, and I would check it every day and move it around, depending on the strength of the salinity of the brisket. But we're not using brisket today, so basically we're all done. It's all done. It's all in there. We're gonna put a lid on it. Make sure everything is clean. You gotta have a clean container. You gotta have clean utensils. Everything has to be cold. I'm talking about the water and the meat. Don't leave the meat out for an hour like they say you're gonna do a steak. That's no good. You got a room temperature meat that's going into cold water. That's no good either. Keep everything cold, 38, 40 degrees.
All right, everyone. So that is the steps for making the pickling for the venison corned beef. Hopefully you guys got a lot of tips out of that, especially putting your finger in there looking for boogers, which was a step that I had no idea. That's why I brought my father in. He's the expert. I guess he's an expert on boogers. So we're going to put this in my walk-in cooler, which we have outside, which previous video you guys saw my walk-in cooler where we have the maple syrup. I still have it running. We are still collecting a little bit of maple syrup. I got about 30 gallons in there right now. They got to boil off, but we've had a lot of wind, so I haven't been making any fires outside. But we will put this in the walk-in cooler. We will let it set. I'll be stirring it every day to check on it. I'll make sure I have a clean finger when I stick it in there, checking for boogers. And then in 7 days, we will come back. It'll be right before St. Patrick's Day, and we will be cooking this up and do an authentic venison, corned beef, and cabbage dinner for everyone. So thank you very much for tuning into our channel. Poppy, thank you very much for coming over today. And I apologize for not having the bottles open, the spices in preparation for your
That's typical.
video.
That's nothing new.
And this is what I get here at the Funny Farm. So again, everybody, thank you. and we will see you on St. Patrick's Day.
Just a note, make sure that the meat is always under the brine. If it floats to the surface, put a plate with some weight on it just to keep the meat under the brine. You don't
Or
want
stick
it
your finger in it and push it down while checking for boogers.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that?
No, because he plays with chickens, so.
And there you go. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on St. Patrick's Day.